The first thing I remember was the smell burnt plastic and something bitter, like the world had just decided to end in smoke. Then the alarms. Then his voice. "Stay with me, damn it." I wanted to laugh. Not because it was funny, but because I'd never heard Dr. Everett sound human before. The man was a glacier with a medical license, every word he spoke precise enough to cut through steel. Yet here he was shouting like his life depended on me breathing. "Doc," I croaked, half dazed, half dead. "If I make it out of this, I'm totally asking you on a date." He froze, just for a second. His mask slipped, and I saw it something raw flickering in his eyes. Then he pressed his hand harder against the gash on my chest, jaw tight. "Focus on not dying first," he snapped. But even through the blur of pain and fire, I couldn't help grinning. The fire started on the east wing of St. Augustine Medical, but it spread faster than anyone expected. I was a paramedic, one of the unlucky ones who happened to be in the ER when it happened. Smoke filled the corridors, lights flickered, and chaos erupted. I remember dragging a kid out, coughing my lungs out, until a support beam came crashing down. Then darkness, heat, weight. When I woke up, I was already in Everett's care. He looked different. His white coat was gone, replaced by a gray t-shirt soaked in sweat and soot. His hands trembled as he checked the monitors beside me. For the first time, he wasn't the cold, perfect chief doctor who barked orders like commandments. He looked like a man who hadn't slept, who'd almost lost something he couldn't replace. "How long?" I asked, voice hoarse. 8 hours since the fire," he said without meeting my eyes. "You had internal bleeding. We operated. You're lucky." I smiled weakly. Lucky's not the word I'd use. He didn't reply. He just turned away, shoulders rigid. But when he thought I was asleep, I saw him reach out, just a small movement, his fingers brushing against mine before retreating. I'd always known Everett was impossible to read. Everyone did. At St. Augustine, he was legend. Youngest chief doctor in the hospital's history, precise, brilliant, emotionally unavailable. The kind of man who made even nurses forget to breathe when he walked by. And I was the complete opposite, the reckless paramedic who cracked jokes during emergencies. The one who never shut up. We'd clashed 1,000 times. "You can't treat every patient like a case study, Doc," I'd once told him. "And you can't save lives with sarcasm," he'd shot back. But now, lying in his recovery room, watching him silently rearrange my 4-line for the 3rd time, I realized something terrifying. I didn't want him to leave. The hospital was a ghost after the fire. Half the staff had been relocated, the rest were patching up survivors. Nights were quiet except for the hum of machines and the low buzz of generators. Everett came to check on me every evening. Always the same ritual: silence, scan, note-taking. Until one night I decided to break it. "So," I began, "about that date." His hand froze midair. "You were delirious." "Was I?" I asked, tilting my head. "Because I remember saying you looked good covered in ash." His lips pressed into a thin line. "You nearly died. That's a yes or a no?" He sighed, setting the chart down. "You don't know what you're saying, Daniel. Try me." For the first time, he looked directly at me. There it was again, that flicker of something under his calm surface. Something that made my heart do the kind of stutter doctors write in charts. "You think this is funny?" he asked quietly. "No," I whispered. "I think it's true." The silence that followed felt heavier than the fire itself. 2 weeks later, I was discharged, at least on paper. But Everett kept me in a private wing for observation. Everyone knew it wasn't protocol, but no one questioned him. Maybe because he'd saved more lives than anyone else that night. Maybe because they saw the way he looked at me when he thought no one noticed. The burn scars on my chest itched when I laughed, but I couldn't help it. Everett was trying too hard to be normal, bringing me meals, avoiding eye contact, pretending he didn't stay in my room past midnight. One night, I caught him staring out the window, the city lights flickering on his face. "You lost people in the fire, didn't you?" I said softly. He didn't turn around. "Everyone did. But you lost someone. Before that, didn't you?" His breath hitched. You shouldn't ask questions you don't want answers to. I stood slowly, painfully, and joined him by the window. Our reflections blurred together in the glass. I almost died that night, Everett, I said. When I thought I wouldn't make it, all I could think about was you, how I never got to know the man behind the mask. He turned then, eyes sharp, almost angry. You shouldn't have to. Too late. And maybe it was the dim light or the exhaustion or just the fact that we'd both seen too much, but he didn't stop me when I reached up and touched his hand. It was trembling. The next morning, everything changed. A news crew had shown up to cover the aftermath of the fire. Everett was called to a meeting. I tried to get up, to walk without his help, but halfway down the hall, I saw him surrounded by reporters, calm, distant, perfect again. Someone asked him about the patients he'd saved, and he answered without hesitation, without emotion, just the way he always did. And for a moment, I wondered if I'd imagined everything. The late-night talks, the quiet touches, the look in his eyes. Then, as he turned to walk away, his gaze flicked toward me, just for a second. But it was enough, because behind that professional mask, I saw it the same fire that had almost taken me, burning quietly in him. That night, he didn't come to my room. For the first time in weeks, I felt cold. Not because of the hospital's sterile air, but because the space beside my bed was empty. I tried to sleep, failed. Tried to forget, failed harder. So I did what any reckless idiot would do. I snuck into his office. The door was slightly open, lights dim. Everett sat at his desk, papers scattered around him, his hands pressed to his temples. He looked exhausted, human. Can't sleep? I asked from the doorway. He didn't even look up. You shouldn't be walking yet. Yeah, well, you shouldn't be avoiding me. That got his attention. I'm not. Yes, you are. I stepped closer. You can face down a burning building, but not me? That's impressive. He stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. You don't understand. Then make me understand. He was breathing hard now, every word sharp as glass. You almost died because I sent you back into the East Wing. I gave that order. If I hadn't, I froze. You think that's why? I can't let this happen, he said, voice breaking. Not again. There it was, the truth, the guilt, the grief, the reason he'd buried himself under walls of control. I took a step closer. You didn't kill me, Everett. You saved me. He laughed bitterly. And what happens next? You get too close, and I ruin you too. You don't ruin people, I whispered. You save them. You saved me. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he broke. The walls he'd built for years crumbled, and before I could think, his hands were on my face, his forehead pressed to mine. I can't lose you, he said, voice cracking. Then don't. The first kiss tasted like smoke and salt, like the memory of fire finally turning into something warm. The moment his lips touched mine, everything inside me went still. No alarms, no smoke, no ghosts from the fire, just him. He kissed me like a man who had spent years denying himself the right to feel anything. It wasn't gentle, not at first. It was desperate, restrained passion clawing its way through guilt and fear. I felt his hands tremble as they cupped my face, the same hands that had stitched me back to life. When we finally broke apart, both of us were breathing like we'd run a marathon. His forehead rested against mine, eyes shut. This shouldn't have happened, he murmured, voice hoarse. Then why did it? I asked softly. He opened his eyes. Because I'm weak. I smiled faintly. No, document. You're human. That seemed to wound him more than anything else. He stepped back, running a hand through his hair. Go back to your room, Daniel. Please. There was no anger in his voice, just exhaustion. But I didn't move. I'm not sorry, I said. He froze. I'm not sorry for what happened. And I'm sure as hell not sorry for how I feel. He turned away. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. You think I don't see it? The way you look at me like I'm a reminder of something you can't fix. You've spent your whole life saving everyone but yourself. That hit him hard. He didn't reply, didn't even look at me, just stood there in silence. Every inch of him pulled tight like a wire about to snap. Finally, he whispered, "Get some rest, Daniel." And that was it. He didn't follow me when I left, and I didn't turn back. But I knew something had changed, something neither of us could take back. Days passed. I healed faster than expected physically, at least. But inside, it felt like the fire had just moved to another place. Everett kept his distance again. No late-night visits. No accidental touches. When he did come to check on me, he was colder than ever, polite, professional, and painfully distant. The nurses noticed, of course. One of them, Marla, winked at me as she changed my bandages. "You pissed off the chief again?" I grinned weakly, pretty sure I short-circuited his emotional wiring. She laughed. "Honey, that man hasn't had emotions since med school. If you got a reaction, that's a miracle." "Yeah," I said under my breath. "Tell me about it." A week later, I was cleared to leave. Everett didn't come to sign my discharge papers himself, he sent someone else. That hurt more than I expected. I gathered my stuff slowly, taking one last look at the sterile room that had somehow become more familiar than my own apartment. Just as I was about to step out, a voice behind me said, "Leaving without saying goodbye?" I turned. He was leaning against the doorway, coat off, sleeves rolled up, looking more human than I'd ever seen him. His eyes were tired, but softer. "Didn't think you'd notice," I said. "I always notice." For a moment we just stood there, neither of us knowing how to start. Then I chuckled. "So, about that date I mentioned before I almost died." He smiled, a small, reluctant thing that looked like it hadn't been used in years. "You never give up, do you?" "Nope," he sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "You're impossible. And you like that about me." "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." He shook his head, but I saw it, that flicker in his eyes again, the one that said maybe, just maybe, he wanted to say yes. "Get out of here before I change my mind," he said finally. I laughed, brushing past him. But as I reached the hallway, he called out, "Daniel." I turned. His expression softened. "Take care of yourself." It wasn't much, but it was enough to make my chest ache. I didn't see him for 3 months. I went back to work at the fire department. Though my captain benched me for a while, said I needed more time. What I really needed was a distraction. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Everett standing in that burning hallway, shouting at me to stay alive. Then one evening I got a call. There'd been another accident, a car pileup on the interstate. I wasn't assigned to it, but when I heard the report mention St. Augustine's ER getting flooded with critical cases, something inside me twisted. Before I knew it, I was there, back in the hospital I swore I'd avoid. It was chaos again. The same sirens, the same shouting. Only this time, the smell of fire was gone, replaced by the metallic sting of blood and diesel. And in the middle of it all, there he was. Everett moved like the world around him didn't exist, issuing orders, stitching wounds, saving lives with surgical precision. For a moment, it was like watching a storm from the eye of it. When he finally saw me, his hand faltered just slightly. Then he straightened. "You shouldn't be here." "Neither should you," I shot back. His jaw tightened. "Daniel, don't Daniel me, document. You look like you haven't slept in days." "I don't have time for this." "Then make time." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You can keep pretending this doesn't matter, but you're not fooling anyone. Not me. Not yourself." His composure cracked, just for a second. "You think I have the luxury to feel anything right now?" "Yes," I said quietly, "because that's what keeps you human." He didn't reply, just stared at me like I'd said something unforgivable. Then, without a word, he turned back to his patient. I wanted to scream. Instead, I walked away. Hours later, after the chaos settled, I found him in the staff lounge, sitting alone. His hands were shaking. "Everett," I said softly. He looked up, and for the first time he didn't hide the exhaustion in his eyes. "Another one didn't make it." I sat beside him. "That's not on you." He laughed bitterly. "Everything's on me. That's what being in charge means." "Bullshit." He blinked. "You're not God, Everett. You can't save everyone. You just try because you care too damn much. even if you pretend not to. He stared at me for a long moment, then whispered, "You think I care? I know you do." He let out a shaky breath. "I cared about you." My heart stopped. He kept going, voice barely above a whisper. "I shouldn't have. You were a patient. You were my responsibility. But when I saw you in that fire, I wasn't thinking like a doctor anymore. He broke off, covering his face with his hands. "I thought I was going to lose you." I reached out, gently prying his hands away. "You didn't." His eyes met mine, raw and open. "I don't know how to do this." "Neither do I," I said, smiling faintly. "But we can figure it out." He exhaled, long and trembling. "You're impossible." "Still like that about me?" This time he didn't deny it. After that night, something shifted again. He didn't make promises. I didn't ask for them. But there were small things: coffee left on my truck before shifts, text messages at 2 a.m. saying, "Still awake?" Quiet walks behind the hospital when the world was asleep. It wasn't a fairy tale. Everett was still a man haunted by guilt, and I was still the idiot who cracked jokes in the face of trauma. But we were learning, slowly. Then one afternoon he invited me to his place. I expected it to be sterile white walls, neat lines, everything perfectly in order. But it wasn't. The shelves were full of books, most of them worn from reading. There was a piano in the corner, dust on the keys. "You play?" I asked. "Not anymore," he said. "Why not?" He shrugged. "Too loud for the neighbors." I grinned. "Play for me." He hesitated, then sat down. The notes that followed were hesitant, almost shy like him. A quiet, melancholy tune that filled the room and my chest at the same time. When he finished, I clapped softly. "You're good." He smirked. "Don't flatter me." "Too late. I'm already in love." He froze, his hands still on the keys. I hadn't meant to say it, not like that, not out loud. But once the words left my mouth, I didn't regret them. He turned slowly, his expression unreadable. "Say that again." "I'm in love with you." Silence. Then he smiled. Not the small, reluctant one I'd seen before. This one was real, soft, almost disbelieving. "You really are reckless," he said. "Guilty as charged." He stood, crossed the room, and stopped in front of me. "You're going to regret this." "Doubt it." And when he kissed me this time, it wasn't desperate or broken. It was steady, certain, like a man finally allowing himself to breathe. That night, as we sat on his couch, the city lights flickering through the window, I leaned against him and whispered, "You know, for someone who said he can't feel, you're pretty good at it." He chuckled quietly. "Don't tell anyone. It'll ruin my reputation." I smiled, closing my eyes. "Your secret's safe with me." Outside, the world kept moving, sirens in the distance, traffic humming below, but for the first time in a long time, everything felt still. And maybe that was enough. The way silence can be louder than fire. In the months after Everett and I stopped pretending, quiet became our language, shared in glances, in late-night talks that drifted into dawn, in the way he traced the scars on my chest like he was memorizing proof that I'd survived. He never said "I love you" outright. Everett wasn't built for easy words. But he showed it in the way he waited up for me after every shift, in the way his shoulders relaxed when I walked through the door, in the soft half-smile he gave when I teased him about being Dr. Robot with feelings now. Sometimes love doesn't come as fireworks. Sometimes it's just coffee at 5 a.m. and the sound of someone breathing beside you who once swore he'd never need anyone. Still, ghosts have a way of creeping back when the world gets too quiet. One night, I found him sitting on the edge of the bed, the light from the window cutting sharp lines across his face. He was staring at his hands that saved lives, hands that had once trembled when they held mine for the first time. "You're doing it again," I said softly, walking over. He didn't look up. "Doing what?" "Blaming yourself for things that aren't your fault." His jaw tightened. "You don't understand, Daniel." "Then explain it to me." He hesitated, then exhaled slowly. "The fire 3 years ago, the one before yours. We lost a patient that night. He was a firefighter like you. He came in with third-degree burns, and I thought I could save him. I pushed the team too hard, ignored the risks. He coded on my table. I sat beside him. You think that was your fault? I know it was. His voice broke. He had a family, 2 kids. I told them he'd make it. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the hum of the city outside, faint and distant. Then I said quietly, "And that's why you froze the night I almost died." He nodded. I reached for his hand. "Everett, you can't keep punishing yourself for being human." He finally looked at me. "You make it sound easy. It's not. But it's possible." He turned his hand over, lacing his fingers through mine. His voice was almost a whisper. "You make me want to believe that." Time moved differently with him after that. Days turned into weeks, and somehow the sharp edges between us softened. He started coming by the firehouse with lunch, awkwardly standing by the truck like he didn't know what to do with his hands while the guys stared. "Who's the doc?" my captain had asked the first time. Personal physician," I'd said quickly. Everett shot me a glare. "Personal something, I see." The crew laughed, and for the first time in years, I saw Everett blush. By summer, we'd fallen into a rhythm. I worked days, he worked nights. Sometimes we barely saw each other for a week, but when we did, it felt like no time had passed at all. There was one night I'll never forget, a storm rolling in, thunder growling like it had a grudge. The power went out across half the city, including our building. Everett was still at the hospital, stuck on an emergency generator. I sat by the window, phone in hand, watching the rain batter the glass. I'd been through fires, collapses, rescues, but that night, I felt a different kind of fear. Then the door opened. He was drenched, hair plastered to his forehead, scrubs clinging to him. He dropped his keys on the counter and sighed. "Don't ask." Elevator stopped halfway. I had to climb out like a damn action movie. I laughed, relief flooding through me. And here I thought doctors avoided reckless behavior. He shot me a look. "I learned from the best." I grinned. "You missed me that much, huh?" Instead of answering, he crossed the room, grabbed my face, and kissed me hard, rain still dripping from his hair onto my cheeks. It wasn't about passion that time. It was about gratitude, about being alive, about all the things we didn't have to say anymore. A few days later, I came home early and found him asleep on the couch, still in his scrubs, a chart open beside him. He looked peaceful in a way I hadn't seen before. The tension that used to hold him together like steel was gone. I sat quietly beside him, watching the rise and fall of his chest. He murmured something in his sleep, my name, and I realized, in that small, still moment, that this was it. Not the chaos, not the rescues, not the heartbreak. This quiet kind of love that asks for nothing but presence. 6 months later, St. Augustine rebuilt the East Wing, the one that had burned down. They held a dedication ceremony, honoring the victims and the staff who'd saved lives that night. Everett was asked to speak. He almost said no. Public speeches weren't his thing. But the morning of the ceremony, he found me tightening my tie in the mirror and said, "If I pass out, catch me." "You, Mr. Composure? I'll believe it when I see it." He smirked. "Don't test me." The event was small but heartfelt. Families gathered. Survivors shared stories. When Everett took the stage, the room fell silent. He spoke slowly, voice steady but soft. "I used to believe that being a doctor meant never letting yourself feel too much. That if you built walls high enough, nothing could break you." He paused, scanning the crowd until his eyes found mine. "But walls don't keep you safe. They keep you alone." My throat tightened. I learned that saving lives isn't just about skill. It's about connection, the courage to care, even when it hurts. And sometimes the people we save end up saving us right back. When he stepped down, I was waiting. He didn't say a word, just reached for my hand right there, in front of everyone. No shame, no hesitation, just truth. That night, we went back to the river where it had all started, the one near the hospital that still smelled faintly of smoke when it rained. The city lights shimmered on the water, and for once, everything felt still. He leaned against the railing, staring at the horizon. "Do you ever think about that night?" "All the time," I said. "But not the fire." I think about what came after. He smiled faintly. You're impossible. And you like that about me. I do. He hesitated, then added, almost shyly, I really do. We stood there in silence for a while, the air thick with everything unspoken. Then he said, You know, when you joked about asking me out in that burning hallway, I thought you were delirious. I admitted. But it didn't make it any less true. He looked at me then, eyes soft with something that had taken him years to admit peace. You saved me, Daniel, he said quietly. Pretty sure it was mutual, document. And when he smiled, it was different this time, unguarded, free. The world didn't magically fix itself after that. We still argued. We still had bad days when he buried himself in work. Days when I woke from dreams of smoke and couldn't breathe. But now we faced it together. There was one night, not long after, when I woke to find him sitting at the piano again. This time he was playing something new, slow, hopeful, the kind of melody that sounds like dawn. When he noticed me, he smiled. Couldn't sleep, didn't want to. I joined him on the bench, resting my head on his shoulder as the notes filled the room. What's it called? I asked. He hesitated. Reconstruction. I laughed softly. Fitting. Everything burns eventually, he said. But sometimes what comes after is stronger. I squeezed his hand. That's us, huh? That's us. The next morning, the sun came up pale and golden, spilling across the kitchen. I was making coffee when he walked in, still half asleep, hair a mess, wearing one of my hoodies instead of his usual crisp shirts. It was such a simple sight, but it hit me like a heartbeat. All those nights wondering if we'd make it, if he'd ever let himself feel this, if I'd ever stop running from what scared me most. He walked up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. What are you smiling about? He murmured into my shoulder. Just thinking, I said. If someone told me a year ago that I'd be living with the guy who once scolded me for joking during triage, I'd have laughed in their face. He chuckled softly. And yet, here we are. Yeah, I said. Here we are. We stood there for a while, listening to the coffee drip, the city waking up outside. No grand declarations, no dramatic music, just the steady rhythm of something real. When he finally let go, he kissed the back of my neck and whispered, You made me believe in second chances. I turned to face him. You gave me one. And as the morning light spilled over us, warm and quiet, I realized that maybe that's what love really is, not about saving someone. Not about perfection, but about staying when everything else burns down. Because sometimes, from the ashes, you don't rebuild what was. You build something new, together. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.